A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Gloria De Piero. Welcome to your lunchtime briefing. We'll have the latest on the investigation into the killing of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel. It is Wednesday. It would normally be Prime Minister's question time at this time on a Wednesday, but there is no Parliament sitting at the moment, so we'll bring you fantasy PMQs. And 6 months on from the invasion into Ukraine by Russia, we will have analysis on the situation there. All that after your news.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A 35-year-old man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool, which killed a 9-year-old girl, has been arrested. Merseyside Police says he'll be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Korbel. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information to come forward. As Ukrainians celebrate Independence Day, the country's President Volodymyr Zelensky has issued an urgent warning about potential brutal attacks from Russia. Ukraine has banned large gatherings as the country marks 31 years of independence, and government employees are being told to work from home. Today also marks 6 months since the Russian invasion began. Oleksiy Goncharenko, a Ukrainian member of parliament, says the war has made the nation stronger.
Definitely for us today is absolutely special Independence Day, because we understand it very, very deeply and in absolutely other way, because for this independence during these 6 months, thousands and thousands of the best Ukrainian people gave their lives. The biggest number of people saying that they're proud to be Ukrainians is now.
More than 23,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year. That's more than double the number at the same time last year. The Ministry of Defence says another 187 migrants made the crossing yesterday. It follows a record day on Monday, which saw nearly 1,300 travel in 27 boats. It's the highest daily total since current records began 4 years ago. Service on the Eurotunnel is back to normal after dozens of people had to be rescued when a train broke down between Calais and Folkestone. Video appears to show passengers in the Channel Tunnel being evacuated through an emergency service route after being stuck for 5 hours overnight. They were eventually transferred to a replacement train and taken to the Folkestone terminal in Kent. Ofgem has been challenged by Scotland's Children's Commissioner over the decision to raise the energy price cap. Bruce Adamson has written to the industry regulator about the potential impact of a cap increase. He's warning more families will be pushed into poverty this winter. Ofgem will make its latest announcement on Friday, with experts forecasting average annual bills will increase to more than £3,500. Mountain biker Rab Wardell has died just 2 days after winning the Scottish cross-country championship. The 37-year-old suffered a cardiac arrest and died in his sleep yesterday. Mr. Wardell won the elite men's title on Sunday, overcoming several punctures to win on the final lap. His partner, Olympic gold medalist Katie Archibald, has revealed she tried to resuscitate Rab and posted an emotional statement online confirming his death. Bin strikes seen in Edinburgh in recent days are expected to grow elsewhere as refuse collectors at 13 Scottish local authorities plan to walk out. Bin workers from cities including Glasgow, Dundee and Aberdeen will join their colleagues in Edinburgh in taking industrial action. Trade unions were offered a 5% pay rise, but a deal wasn't reached. Rubbish has been piling up in the Scottish capital since the strike started last Thursday, and they're expected to last another week. A hosepipe ban impacting more than 15 million people in southern England has come into force today as Thames Water becomes the latest company to restrict usage. It's thought by the end of the week, more than 29 million people in the UK will be under some form of hosepipe ban as more companies enforce restrictions. The Environment Agency's reported 10 out of 14 regions are in drought. Those found to have breached the rules could be fined up to £1,000. And Princess Diana's much-loved Ford Escort RS is up for sale this weekend by Silverstone Auction House. The car will be auctioned just days before the 25th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. The historic car was driven by the Princess between 1985 and 1988 and expected to fetch up to around £100,000. This is GB News. We'll have more as we get it. Now, though, it's back to Gloria with the briefing.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, we'll be heading to Liverpool to get the latest as the 35-year-old target of the gunman who killed Olivia Pratt-Corbell has been arrested. We have fantasy PMQs today with an ex-Labour and an ex-Conservative MP. What would they be asking if Parliament was in session today? And today marks 6 months since Putin unleashed the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We'll speak to GB News Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. To our top story, police are still on the hunt this morning for the killer of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell as Liverpool continues to reel from the tragedy. Merseyside's Police Chief Constable Serena Kennedy has appealed for anyone with information involving the gunman to come forward, adding, "No mum, no dad, no sister or brother should ever have to experience loss in this way." Well, let's now cross over to GB News Northwest reporter Sophie Reaper, who is at the scene. Sophie, good to see you. Bring us the latest, if you would.
Of course. Well, the latest update that we've had in this case is that the 35-year-old man who was being chased by the gunman who shot and killed Olivia Pratt-Corbell has now been arrested. Merseyside Police has told us that this arrest has happened as a result of the man breaching the terms of his release from prison and that he will now be questioned in connection to Olivia's murder. Yesterday, the police told us the sequence of events that they believed led up to Olivia's death. They told us that 2 men were walking along this road when they were approached by a man holding a handgun. He began to shoot and the two men fled from him. Upon hearing the noise outside, Olivia's mum Cheryl opened the front door. Upon seeing the front door open, one of the men, the 35-year-old who's been arrested, sought refuge in the house and was then followed in by the gunman. He managed to get his hand past the front door, past Olivia's mum. He shot, hitting Olivia's mum Cheryl in the wrist. He then shot and fatally wounded Olivia. And he then managed to fire 2 shots which hit the 35-year-old man who's been arrested in the chest. He's being treated still at hospital, but as I say, he has been arrested. This morning we've seen police at the scene and people in forensic suits taking what looks like samples from one of the houses behind me here at Kings Heath Avenue. This is all part of the murder investigation that is now ongoing to find the killer of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot and killed here on Monday night. Merseyside Police are continuing to urge anyone in the community who might have any information to come forward so that they can find the person behind the death of the 9-year-old girl.
Thank you so much for the update. Thank you, Sophie Reaper. Well, Steve Reid, Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, spoke to GB News earlier today.
I express my absolute horror at what's happened and my sympathy with this, with Olivia, this 9-year-old little girl and her family, for this insane, crazy, sickening act that has been carried out. And I know the people of the city of Liverpool are big-hearted with a strong sense of community, and I know that they will be looking to try and find out any names they have that they can feed to the police to try and apprehend this killer before he can strike again. But we also need to look at why sentencing for violent crime has been falling. in recent years. So custodial sentences has fallen for people who are using knives to kill and to maim in recent years. The absolute opposite of what the Conservatives promised when they were elected. And if we let criminals get away with it in that way, if we fail to prosecute them and lock them up, it simply encourages more criminals to get out there and do the same thing. So they really have to. It kind of connects to the previous issues. The delays in the courts, cases not coming forward and being prosecuted, all of this feeds this problem. For here and now, I think we need to focus on our thoughts and prayers with the family of this little girl and hoping that whoever's got any information at all will bring it forward to the police.
And that was Steve Reid, the Shadow Justice Secretary, speaking to GB News earlier today. Now, moving on. It's Wednesday, and at this time, we'd normally be bringing you Prime Minister's questions. What would the issues be today if Parliament was in session? Well, let's now speak to former Labour MP Graham Jones and former Conservative MP and former Foreign Office Minister Alistair Burt. Gentlemen, it is good to see you both. I hope you're both well. Alistair, let's start with you. What would you ask today if you were back in the House of Commons, the Commons were sitting, and you had a Prime Minister's question today?
I think if I was in there today, it's extremely difficult to avoid the main news of the day, which is the report you've just carried in relation to Liverpool. It's unbelievably tragic when anyone loses their life in circumstances such as that, and for a child to be shot in the way in which we've heard about is just awful. And you would inevitably be asking the Prime Minister, tell us more about what has happened, what you think has happened, and what, above all, can be done about it. I did hear the Police and Crime Commissioner for Liverpool on the radio this morning, who was saying that actually gun crime in Liverpool had been falling. So this is a particularly awful circumstance to deal with, because not only of the incident itself, but what it suggests is happening, which may not be correct. But you would want to be asking today, what is the Prime Minister's response to the shooting in Liverpool, and convey the sentiments of the House and our utter detestation of the act and our sympathy for the family and everyone involved.
It does make you realise, actually, that you would want to be talking about that in Parliament today, but that is the nature of our recesses. Graham Jones from Labour, same questions to you. What would you ask if you had a Prime Minister's question today and you were back on those green benches? God forbid.
Well, first of all, it's good to see Alistair, and I hope you're well. I agree with Alistair. I think we've got the shooting and we've got the energy price cap going up tomorrow, so those are the two key issues facing the public. And I would ask about home insulation. Why over the last 12 years have we not insulated houses? Why have we not set higher standards for insulation now? Why has the government not done anything about it? And particularly for places like Haslingden and Hyndburn, which have a lot of terraced houses, why did we cut the ECO back in 2012, I think it was, that ended a lot of the pilot programmes to insulate terraced properties, which are often in EPC bands C, D and E, and in desperate need, and those are the people who are in fuel poverty. So why is the government taking the decisions then, and why is it not acting now?
It's rather odd at the moment, politics, because of the fact that we're electing, or Conservative Party members are choosing who our next Prime Minister is. Alistair, who are you backing as a Conservative member?
Well, it's good to see both of you, actually. It's rather nice. I'm sure we all miss some of the aspects of the Commons, sort of getting together with friends across the parties, and it's nice to see you both too. I haven't voted yet. I'm taking my time. I'll watch the last hustings. But I'm one of the Conservative members who hasn't really been addressed in this campaign. In 2016, about 7 million Conservative voters voted to remain in the European Union. We don't think we were wrong. We don't regret it, and we're not sorry. But it seems to me no one in this campaign has recognised that if we appreciate the result and accept the result, we need to hear something from one of the leaders that talks about the reality of the decision that was made, wanting to create a good relationship with Europe going forward, not looking for opportunities to fall out, recognising the importance of working closely with the trading bloc and with the political leaders of Europe. And all I've heard is a competition from both candidates as to who is the most Brexity. Whether one who campaigned for it in the first place or one who did not campaign, but now obviously regrets that she did not and wants to do something else. So I'm one of those who accepts all that's been said about Brexit, accepts the result, but like 7 million other Conservative voters, want to know where we go forward from there so that we're not continuing to repeat the battle. And I've not heard clearly a representation from either candidate addressing the 7 million like me. And although my vote is reasonably secure at the next general election, there's a lot of those Conservative voters whose vote may not be secure, and they're in swing seats and they're in blue seats as well as red seats. And who's going to be talking to them if there's going to be some unity in the Conservative Party after September the 5th? So I'm waiting to hear about that, Gloria.
Very interesting perspective, one that we don't hear very often in your party, and certainly not throughout this leadership race. Graham, if, as looks likely, Liz Truss emerges victorious in this contest, new leaders, they normally get a bounce in the opinion polls. How should Keir Starmer take her on, the third female Conservative woman Prime Minister?
Well, I'm not so sure Keir needs advice from me. He's doing a great job. He's a great leader and he's doing a great job. And I'm probably not the person to give him advice. We've got a great team supporting him as well. And I'm sure he'll find a way to address the issues. And I think it is about issues, not personalities. And I agree with Alistair, large parts of the country being neglected with this Conservative Party race, which seems to be a chase to the right, and a few voters in the Conservative Party. I think Keir wants to speak for the country and at least drag the Prime Minister in the last few months, or however long they've got, back to the centre ground and the reality of British politics, which I think is kind of what Alistair said.
Alistair, you will know Liz Truss far better than Graham or I. What can you tell us about her? She doesn't seem naturally cautious, but I'm imagining there's going to be pressure for her to call a general election because we have this peculiar situation in both parties that if that party is in government, then it is members, not voters, who choose the next Prime Minister. And there may be a clamour for the public to have their say sooner rather than later, Alistair.
There may be, but I don't think necessarily that would be wise. As you say, Gloria, both parties are used to changing leaders during the course of a parliament, knowing that an election is due at some stage thereafter. New leaders want to set out their own stall, what they want their government to do, so that the public are judging them not on the promises they made in the leadership contest, nor on the performance of the administration that they've replaced, but on what they've done. And bearing in mind the criticism we've heard in recent weeks that the contest has already gone on too long and government isn't functioning at the moment. It's an allegation. Of course, the government is functioning. But to have a genuine period where it couldn't function because there would be a possibility of a change of government from Conservative to something different, then I can't see how that would benefit the country. So if whoever wins, whether Liz Truss wins or Rishi Sunak wins, I hope they will resist any clamour for a general election, get on with the job, which is what they should be doing and will be judged on. And that, I think, will be best going forward.
Graham, I was in my former constituency of Ashfield earlier this year, well, a few weeks ago, in fact. And I was speaking to voters in the pub there, and they were expressing their discontent with the government. Boris Johnson was still in post. It was towards his later days. But Keir Starmer, they didn't really know anything about him. So, many lifelong Labour voters who had given their vote to Boris Johnson, they weren't saying, yeah, we're slam dunk, we're going straight back. Are you finding that in your former Red Wall constituency?
Well, I saw your interview. It was interesting. No, I think when you're the leader of the opposition, you don't get the airtime. I know in politics we think that everything's blown up. But for the general public who spend a minute or two each week on politics, they don't see and can't name politicians, and that certainly applies to the leader of the opposition. It's just a fact of life. People have busy lives, and and politics is not always, or in many cases isn't, a priority, particularly now. So no, I think Keir will lay his case out before the general election, and that's when people will want to look at him, they'll want to make a judgment, and I think that in reality that's when they will make that judgment, and it's for Keir to prepare himself and prepare the party for that general election.
Alistair, top of Liz Truss's, if she or whoever becomes our next Prime Minister, top of their priority list will be the cost of living. Keir Starmer has outlined a plan that bills will not go up, that they will be capped for 6 months. He says he has costed that policy and it is the right thing to do. Should the new Conservative Prime Minister do something similar? Is it something of that order, pretty radical, pretty clear, that the country needs? Of course, he has faced criticism because obviously it would benefit richer people too, that policy.
You're absolutely correct that the top of the list for the new Prime Minister will be a cost of living crisis, which we have not faced for a very long time and has towards us like a speeding train. The cost in energy prices in particular, we all know it's coming, and it's going to take every resource of government in order to be able to deal with. The practicalities will be finding ways to support both individuals and businesses who, if they face mounting bills, they will only pass it on to the customer in due course, or they may face struggles in their business and go out of business, which will add to the problems. Making sure that people can afford to pay the price will mean government intervention of some sort. If it's given directly to people, yes, you can do that through the benefit system. But then, in my experience, having been a minister in the benefits in the Department for Social Security many years ago, the moment you're benefiting one group rather than another, you create a ceiling and a step change, and people just over a limit, just over a band, feel very aggrieved if they're not supported. You get all sorts of problems. That's why universal application of support is so much easier for the system to do. You prevent these cliff edges and you're able to support everyone. But of course, it does mean giving money in some places to those who could afford to pay extra. But then that's where taxation comes in. So I think it's a real struggle. There's going to have to be something done to make sure people are paying a reasonable price. Government will have to support either by some form of freezing. And it's interesting that I saw Kwasi Kwarteng was meeting with energy leaders just a couple of days ago, and they were putting forward something that would cost more than the furlough scheme, maybe £100 billion over a set number of years, and say the government could pay that back off over a period of time, and that would freeze the prices. But that's a big ask for government. Money would have to be borrowed. I think both Richie and Liz Truss have indicated that they're going to have a very hard look at it when they get through the door. I think they're avoiding full detail now. Because one or other of them will have the responsibility, I suppose they can do that, but they're going to have to act extremely fast after September the 5th.
We're out of time, gentlemen. I thoroughly enjoyed your company. I thought that was incredibly civil, fantasy PMQs. Maybe Parliament could learn from it. And I hope you come back again. Former Conservative MP Alistair Burt and former Labour MP Graham Jones. Thank you for indulging us. Coming up, I'll be speaking with Conservative MP Duncan Baker, who welcomed a Ukrainian refugee family to his home. Before that, it's a quick break.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here with your latest weather update. Sunny, hot and humid in the southeast today, but cloudier skies elsewhere with outbreaks of rain for many, especially the southwest of England and parts of Wales. A weather front divides the country at the moment, hot and humid air to the southeast of that front, whilst fresher conditions with some showers follow to the northwest, also turning breezier. But in between, where we see that weather front crossing parts of northern and western England, Wales as well, there'll be some outbreaks of rain, quite a lot of cloud cover, the rain turning heavier and more prolonged for parts of West Wales and southwest England later on. Rain clearing the Northern Isles, and then for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, bright skies and a few showers. Feeling cool here, but hot and sunny in the southeast, up to 30 or 31 Celsius for parts of East Anglia, and feeling humid as well. And that humidity could set off 1 or 2 showers into the evening here. And the weather front across central parts of the UK also tends to edge southeastwards, giving a few more showers. But the possibility towards the end of the night of some thundery rain coming along into the southeast. 18 or 19 Celsius overnight in the southeast, while Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales sees clear spells, much cooler conditions. A wet start then for East Anglia in the southeast. Some of that heavy rain clearing away first thing, lingering across parts of Norfolk and Suffolk into the afternoon, however. Eventually, drier, clearer and fresher air arrives from the northwest. Fairly breezy for the west of Scotland and Northern Ireland with some showers here and temperatures in the mid to high teens, whilst it's much cooler for many and certainly feeling fresher as that rain clears away into the evening, with a much more comfortable night for sleeping across the board. Then we end the week with further showers on Friday, but increasingly through the weekend the weather tends to settle down. We'll see more sunny spells coming through and temperatures at around average.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 6 months on from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and many families from Ukraine are still living in the UK as the war rages on. My next guest, MP Duncan Baker, has been hosting a mum and son from Ukraine for months now. He's here to tell me how it's going. It's good to see you, Duncan Baker, Tory MP for North Norfolk. Just tell us about the mum and son who have been sharing your home.
Hi, Gloria. Well, it's been coming up to 5 months now. They came to live with us on the 3rd of April. And like many sponsors, it was just one of those chance meetings where we found, our family found their family through constituents, actually. Never knew each other until that moment that we met through a video call. And at the end of that call, my wife and I, well, to be very honest with you, we were in absolute tears like so many other people who have reached out to help those fleeing such atrocities. And Anna and Svetik, we were able to get them arranged to come and live with us. And they've been under our roof, in our house, as I say, now for nearly 5 months. And, you know, it's very clear that the war is not settling down quite yet, and we'll remain with them and supporting them until it's safe to go home. And they've become really part of the family and firm friends for life, really.
It's very heartwarming to hear. Is her husband, the dad, still in Ukraine?
Yeah, he is. Vitaly works for the University of Kyiv, so he's not on the front line. He's trying to do what so many men are trying to do out there, which is just simply keep going, continue to try and work if they can. But of course, it's human nature that you miss your wife and your child desperately. They keep in touch constantly. Vitaly doesn't speak really any English at all, so we've sort of had very, very loose amounts of conversations together just because of the language barrier. But Anna speaks good English. She's now got a job at the local school along with my children. And her little boy, Svetik, he came with nothing. I mean, he couldn't speak hardly any English at all, but he's an extremely bright little boy. And 5 months later, his English is absolutely superb. So, you know, people say, well, we've changed their lives, but, you know, it's not really that case at all. As much as anything, they've changed ours. And we have celebrated birthdays together. We've been on holiday all together as a family. It's part of humanity and it's human nature. And I'm just one of many, many hundreds of thousands now of sponsor families. I was the first MP to do it, and there's been lots of MPs around me that have done it. But, you know, we involve Anna and Svetik. They're part of our family. They've gone off this last couple of days to have a trip to London and seen Houses of Parliament for themselves. I'm still in the constituency. And, you know, it just works. We all get together and cook together and generally eat together, and just as a normal family operates around each other.
It's really lovely, quite emotional to listen to your experience, actually. I'm guessing that Anna and her son, they want to go back home at some point. Is it possible for them to even think about that?
That's a really good question, and it's a big question. So we're coming up to 6 months for many sponsor families, and of course, many of us all signed up for this first 6 months, and of course now the big question is what will happen next. And we were quite keen to make sure that we made a commitment, that we helped this family. We didn't know them, you know, before that moment that they stepped off the plane and we all met together. But we don't feel that it is right for them to move to another sponsor family. And so we've all talked together pretty much as a family and said, look, what can we do to try and help you? And what we're going to do is, it's very clear that they can't go back yet. Anna is scared for going back to Kyiv. It was a real turning point probably about 2 months ago when we started to have conversations about, well, what will happen at the end of the period of time. And with the missile strikes that had happened in the last, say, 2 months, it was very clear that they just didn't feel it was safe. And it is very emotional. I mean, her parents are behind Russian lines in the Donbass. And, you know, there are tears. She may never see her parents again, is her feeling. And so you do feel very, very committed to wanting to help people. So we're going to help them get a little bit more independence and freedom, because living in the Baker family is quite intense when you're a constituency MP. But our children are all sort of besotted with each other. You know, it is emotional. They are, you know, they do everything together. So we're going to support them with a little flat, just literally half a mile down the road. So we're all together at weekends. But, you know, at the moment, Anna's little bedroom that she's got is our back spare bedroom, and it's not conducive to staying there for 18 months. So we're going to help her, and we feel that's the right thing to do because, you know, we feel all connected as one.
Duncan Baker, real pleasure to listen to your experience there. Give our best to Anna and family. Next on The Briefing, we'll be looking at the past 6 months of the war in Ukraine with GBNews Home and Security Editor Mark White. First, it is your news update.
It's 12:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A 35-year-old man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool which killed a 9-year-old girl has been arrested. Merseyside Police says he'll be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information to come forward. As Ukrainians celebrate Independence Day, the country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has issued an urgent warning about potential brutal attacks from Russia. Ukraine has banned large gatherings as the country marks 31 years of independence and government employees are being told to work from home. It's also 6 months since the Russian invasion began. Speaking from Salisbury Plains, where Ukrainian troops are training with British military, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer reiterated his party's unshakable support for the people of Ukraine.
6 months after the start of the conflict in Ukraine, I've been here in Salisbury Plain looking and watching Ukrainian troops being trained by British troops here with live rounds, simulating the situation they're going to be facing. That's given me the opportunity to say and to reiterate Labour's commitment and support for the Ukrainian people and our unshakable support for NATO and our allies. And I've been so impressed with the training I've seen here.
A hosepipe ban impacting more than 15 million people in southern England has come into force today as Thames Water becomes the latest company to restrict water usage. It's estimated by the end of the week more than 29 million people in the UK will be under some form of hosepipe ban as more companies enforce restrictions. It comes after a drought was officially declared across most of England following the driest July in 50 years. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. It's back to the briefing with Gloria in just a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Today, Ukraine marks 6 months since the Russian invasion, coinciding with its Independence Day, celebrating 31 years of freedom from Soviet rule. Let's look back at some of the key events of the war. On the 24th of February, Russia's President Vladimir Putin ordered a full-scale attack on Ukraine. On the 8th of March, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky made his first address to the UK Parliament as civilians were given permission to evacuate Ukraine through humanitarian corridors. On the 4th of April, mass graves were discovered near Kyiv, with Zelensky accusing Russia of genocide. Then, on the 9th of April, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, made his first visit to the war-torn country as a show of support. On the 27th of June, following further escalation, Russian missiles struck a shopping mall in the city of Kremenchuk, killing more than 20 people. And on the 1st of August, the first vessel carrying Ukrainian grain left Odessa under a UN and Turkey brokered deal between Ukraine and Russia. So far, support for Ukraine from Western allies has remained steadfast. But as our security editor Mark White reports, some military experts predict that support could fracture as many countries struggle to cope with an energy shortage and a likely economic recession in the coming months.
6 months on from the Russian invasion, in the towns of eastern Ukraine, this has become a war of attrition. Here in Toretsk, Arkady Batchuk is back to sift through what remains of his apartment block after the latest Russian shelling, which killed 2 of his neighbours. To add to the misery here, the strikes have crippled the town's water supplies, but Arkady and many others here are determined to stay put.
We are not planning to leave. I was born here, even though my wife is from Lviv. We got married and are living here. We are not planning to run anywhere.
Since the first missiles rained down on Ukraine's towns and cities, the West has been united in both its condemnation of Moscow and its support for the Ukrainian people. In the early days of the war, the Russian tanks rolled quickly over many miles of Ukrainian soil, encircling key population centres, including Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, which suffered weeks of bombardment. But a rush towards the capital was halted and then reversed, thanks to fierce Ukrainian resistance. And growing numbers of sophisticated Western weapons systems provided by key allies, including the US and the UK. That Western resolve is holding, but with a bleak winter ahead, with many countries feeling the effects of energy shortages and the likelihood of economic recession, maintaining that high level of support over the long run could be a tough ask.
I think we're going to see a reduction in unity as we get into the winter, particularly with the energy problems that countries like Germany will face, both domestically and in industrial terms. And that, I think, will lead to Germany and other Western countries, including NATO countries, reducing their support for Ukraine and probably pressuring Zelensky to come to terms with Russia.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
One of the first Western leaders to travel to the Ukrainian capital after the outbreak of the war, Boris Johnson has been at the forefront of support for President Zelensky's efforts to fight off Russian aggression. Publicly, at least, both candidates to take over from Boris Johnson say that support will continue.
What we've seen, in the past few months is the Russians have made some gains. They've taken some territory in the Donbas region, but they're very incremental. The Ukrainians are pushing back. We're back to it's World War I like trench warfare. It's a war of attrition, and so unless something dramatic happens to change this war can grind on for a long time.
In recent weeks, Ukrainian troops have begun a pushback in some key areas, including around the strategically important city of Kherson, currently under Russian control, but looking increasingly isolated. 6 months on, Ukraine's armed forces and its people are in this fight for the long haul. They desperately hope their Western allies are as committed in the months ahead. Mark White, GB News.
And I'm delighted to say that Mark White joins me now in the studio following that report. So 6 months today since the war started. You talked about Western resolve there. Can it be maintained for a further 6 months and beyond?
I think certainly in the short term, yes. It will be increasingly difficult, though, for particularly countries in Europe who are facing an energy shortage, and what that is doing, of course, to the price not just of fuel bills but commodities as well. Many of these economies could well be heading into recession, so trying to maintain that level of support within their own populations might be difficult. But the alternative is also, just not worth contemplating for these European countries, these NATO members, which is Vladimir Putin prevailing. And the message that would send about the resolve of the West, and NATO in particular, to other of these hardline autocrats around the world as well. And in particular, of course, you've got President Xi in China, who's looking on very closely at what is going on in Ukraine at the moment. We know that China has spoken about trying to take back Taiwan at some point in the coming years.
Can Ukraine win this? What are we doing to help?
I think whatever happens, it's going to be a long and bloody conflict. But Ukraine is being helped enormously by that resolve that we've been talking about from the West. Today, the US is going to announce again a further $3 billion of military aid for Ukraine, on top of the $10 billion that it's already offered. And Germany have just announced as well €500 million in military aid. The UK, one of the biggest providers of military aid and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine as well, has given some £4 billion so far, and more is likely to be heading their way. In addition to that, what the UK is doing is training thousands of Ukrainian armed forces here in this country to equip them with the skills to go back to Ukraine to take the fight to Vladimir Putin's troops. And today, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has been at Salisbury Plain to see for himself the work that the British military has been doing to train these Ukrainian forces. This is what he told us.
6 months after the start of the conflict in Ukraine, I've been here in Salisbury Plain looking and watching Ukrainian troops being trained by British troops here with live rounds, simulating the situation they're going to be facing. That's given me the opportunity to say and to reiterate Labour's commitment and support for the Ukrainian people and our unshakable support for NATO and our allies. And I've been so impressed with the training I've seen here. I think the global reputation of British forces is of grit, of class, and of that sort of steely determination and courage on the battlefield. And I've had the opportunity to say thank you to them for providing that vital training. Some of these that they're training will be back on the front line in just a few days' time. So I've been able to say thank you for that training and for all the service they provide around the world. And my mission, my message to the Ukrainian people, to our troops, our NATO allies, is that on the issue of defending Ukraine against Russian aggression, we stand united. We will not be divided politically in the United Kingdom on this. And I've been able to deliver that message firsthand amongst this very, very impressive training.
The Labour leader speaking a little bit earlier this morning. Final question to you, Mark. Winter is coming. How does that change the nature of the conflict?
Well, it's going to make an already very difficult war much more complicated. They've got about a couple of months to go before the weather really starts to change. At the moment, the Ukrainian armed forces are on a counter-offensive down in the south, the strategically important city of Kherson. They're hoping to try to retake that city. That would be a significant blow for the Russians. The Russians are trying to take more of the Donbass before winter sets in. But as hard as it's going to be for the Ukrainians to fight and prosecute this war in the winter, it's going to be even tougher for the Russians. They're on the ends of their supply lines, not on their own soil. It'll be difficult for them.
Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, thank you. Thanks very much. Let's now move on to the race for number 10. How are both candidates faring with, most important people, the voters? Joining me now is the co-founder of Delta Poll, Joe Twyman. Joe, good to see you. So Conservative Party members are voting, but it's the country's view that matters. What qualities are voters looking for in our next Prime Minister?
When you ask the general public, what comes top of the list is honesty and strength in leadership. But what's interesting is that prior to Boris Johnson being elected leader, similarly, they wanted honesty and strength of leadership. And so clearly people are willing to compromise on certain aspects. As we know, Boris Johnson famously was not famed for his honesty, but there are other elements that come into it that perhaps don't get picked up in surveys. These intangibles that people find it difficult to articulate. Things like personality, things like people being seen as ordinary people and understanding ordinary people. These are all very important for any leader.
Labour has its biggest lead in the opinion polls for about a decade. How robust is that lead?
The truth is nobody can know, because the situation that is in front of us with regards to everything from the situation in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, energy bills and inflation means that it's very, very difficult to see how the polls will go, given that we know we will have a new leader in the form of either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak within the next few weeks. Now, historically, a new leader actually getting into Downing Street has not produced much of a bump in the polls. Boris Johnson received a 6% bounce, Theresa May a 5% bounce, but at the moment the gap is at, in some cases, 15%, and certainly in double figures. And so it's unlikely, based on history, that when Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak gets into Downing Street, they'll suddenly find themselves overtaking Labour in the polls. And then over the coming weeks and months, there are major issues that need to be dealt with. The most pressing, of course, is the cost of living and the energy crisis, but that is by no means the only thing on the future Prime Minister's list. And how they deal with that will determine the placing not just of the Conservatives in the polls, but also Labour as well. And since we don't know how they will respond, or indeed how the general public will then respond to that, it's very difficult to say.
We've got about a minute left. You mentioned the cost of living being number one issue in terms of what's playing in people's mind, understandably. What else is playing?
Sorry, could you say the question again?
So you mentioned that the cost of living, understandably, is the key issue in people's mind. Is that the only show in town, or are there other issues playing in those, in terms of the key issues that people want the Prime Minister to deal with? We've got about 30 seconds left.
Yes, there are other issues. We have NHS, immigration, taxation. All of these are important to people. Britain's relationship with the European Union post-Brexit, it's all important. But the cost of living crisis is by far the most important thing. Everything stems from that. And for many people, that is the only game in town.
Jo Twyman, as ever, thank you for your polling analysis and wisdom. Thank you. Now, a trade union boss has threatened further strikes at Britain's largest container port unless workers are given a better pay offer. Nearly 2,000 dock workers have walked out for 8 days and were this morning joined by Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of the Unite Union. Our GB News reporter Will Hollis is at the picket line in Felixstowe for us. Will, just tell us about the source of this dispute.
Good morning. Yeah, it's quite frankly and quite simply about pay. The people who work at this dock say that they haven't been on strike for 30 years, so it must be a really serious reason for them to go on strike now. The figure that they say they're looking for is something in line with inflation, so around 10%, something like that. The figure that we've been hearing that they've been offered and rejected is 7%. They're represented by Unite the Union, and as you said, they had a very special visitor this morning, essentially the boss of the union, Sharon Graham. She came down and spoke to people. I also had a chance to speak to her for a little bit. We talked about a few different things about that inflationary pay rise, 10%, as well as how long strikes might go on for. And the big one, which is the real big part and the next step of this conversation and the next cycle of this strike news, whether there will be a general strike, and we could see the entire country essentially stood still by people not going to work.
Well, I mean, look, from our point of view, what you see for workers is that they've had a spring, summer, winter and autumn of discontent. And so therefore the commonality of these strikes are pay cuts. Now, for me, what I want to do is to make sure that workers get a better piece of the pie and that workers are able to get what they need from their employer. If an employer can't pay, that's a different conversation, and we have different negotiations. I've got negotiations with 38,000 employers in terms of pay. But I'll tell you something that's interesting. If it was the bosses out on strike, nobody would notice, because it's the workers that make the money, it's the workers that do the work. So give them a fair piece of the pie and allow them to go back to work.
This is the first strike of this sort in 30 years. I think these sort of strikes don't happen because it is such an important port. What do you think the disruption will be from this 8 days and then any potential strikes, which I believe Unite hasn't ruled out any more strikes happening?
Yeah, so look, I mean, there is disruption, and I think it's really unfortunate because the disruption has happened because the employer wants to be greedy. This is not about workers' greed, this is about an employer's greed. And so therefore the workers have had to take the very unusual step. You've said for 30 years this port hasn't been out on strike. The very unusual step to go out and strike. And the reason that they've had to do that is that the employer has said, it doesn't matter that we're awash with money, it doesn't matter that you've made us all this money, we still want you to take a pay cut. And so until they come back with a revised offer, unfortunately the strikes will continue and obviously disruption will continue. And I'm disappointed about that, but obviously that question should be with the employer.
You'll have seen that a lot of trucks have been going in and out of the port. It is pretty much closed and very quiet, but a lot of trucks are going in there. They're often coming out with their containers as well. Just a reminder, 48% of UK goods come in and out of this port, so any further strike action beyond this 8 days is certainly going to have massive effects on the country.
Will Hollis in Felixstowe, thank you. You have been watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back every Monday to Thursday from noon. I will be here tomorrow. Join me for a Life and Times interview with Nigel Farage, no less. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. But for now, it is time for your weather.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here with your latest weather update. Sunny, hot and humid in the southeast today, but cloudier skies elsewhere with outbreaks of rain for many, especially the southwest of England and parts of Wales. A weather front divides the country at the moment, hot and humid air to the southeast of that front, whilst fresher conditions with some showers follow to the northwest, also turning breezier. But in between, where we see that weather front crossing parts of northern and western England, Wales as well, there'll be some outbreaks of rain, quite a lot of cloud cover, the rain turning heavier and more prolonged for parts of West Wales and southwest England later on. Rain clearing the Northern Isles, and then for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, bright skies and a few showers. Feeling cool here, but hot and sunny in the southeast, up to 30 or 31 Celsius for parts of East Anglia, and feeling humid as well. And that humidity could set off 1 or 2 showers into the evening here, and the weather front across central parts of the UK also tends to edge southeastwards, giving a few more showers, but the